Have you been wondering how to be free from identification with thought? If so, this video is for you. Hello, my friend. I hope you are well. My name is Matt Tenney. I'm the author of The Magic of Mindful Self-Awareness: How to Stop Overthinking, Clear Your Mind, and Be Happy Almost All the Time. On this channel, I help people apply the practice of mindfulness and mindful self-awareness to be happier, less stressed, and more effective. I look forward to helping you as well, my friend. This video is in response to a comment left by a subscriber named Barbara on the topic of identification with thought. Let's start off with, well, what does identification with thought mean? How do you know if you're identified with thought or not identified with thought? At the most basic level, you know that you are not identified with thought if you are observing thoughts as objects. Whether this means visually, you can see a visual image in the mind and see it as an object that just arises and passes away, or if you are listening inwardly and you can listen to the inner voice, you can hear it as though it is an object, almost as though you're listening to a voice coming in through earbuds or through a speaker. In either case, if we see or hear, I'm just going to use the word see as the general term. If we see or hear thoughts as objects that arise and pass away, we're not identified with them. And the opposite is also true for what it means to be identified with thought. If we're not seeing thoughts, if we're not hearing them, and it feels as though we are those thoughts, it feels as though I am that voice in my head, that means we're identified with those thoughts. And there are very obvious physical symptoms that arise with either case. So if you are identified with thoughts, you will notice that when thoughts are positive, you feel good. And when thoughts are negative, you will notice an unpleasant emotional response in the body. However, when we're not identified with thoughts, if we see them as objects, again, neither seeing a visual image or hearing the inner voice as though it's coming in from a speaker or through earbuds, you will notice that a thought can be negative and it provokes no emotion in the body. And this is because we don't feel as though the thought is me. This is just something else happening. And this is really one of the most important reasons to take time to practice while sitting still. While practicing while sitting still, what tends to happen is you start to observe a lot of things with objectivity. You notice, okay, there are sounds happening. You notice there are certain physical sensations happening. You notice as your awareness becomes a little more refined, if you're just sitting doing nothing, you'll also notice the body's breathing. And all these things start to seem very objective. It's not that I'm breathing, it's just there's breathing happening, right? There's sound happening. And little by little is we develop this awareness that thought is very much like that. Thought is just something else that's happening. And when we have this perspective, this relationship with thoughts, then they're just something else that's happening. We're not identified with them, right? We see them as objects, and this is where freedom lies. Where now we have the correct and healthy relationship with thoughts, which is that these are very useful tools. They can provide tremendous value. We don't need to get rid of thoughts or eliminate them. They're a wonderful tool to use. However, we don't need to be identified with them to take advantage of the value that they provide. So a thought can arise. If it's not skillful, we let it arise and pass away without any emotional response in the body. If a thought arises that's skillful, we can choose to act on it or not act on it. And this is what the practice brings. It brings this freedom of choice. I think Viktor Frankl said it best, the author of Man's Search for Meaning, when he said there is a space between stimulus and response, and in that space lies our freedom. And the practice of mindful self-awareness is intentionally and systematically cultivating this space between stimulus and response so that we can choose to engage with thoughts. We can choose to identify with them if you really want to. But the point is, you have a choice. Most people without training have no choice. If their thoughts are positive, they feel good. If their thoughts are negative, they don't feel good. So, how do we actually develop this ability to see thoughts objectively and thereby not be identified with them? There could be the initial thought might be, well, this is obvious. I just need to practice looking at my mind and observing the thoughts. And I would caution against that unless you've been practicing for some time, because if we start off trying to just observe the mind directly, we can get caught up in thoughts pretty easily because thoughts tend to move pretty fast. And this is why I recommend a more gradual approach where we start off with a general awareness of the body, whatever it's doing. So if you're doing sitting still practice, you start off with a general awareness of the body. And what I think you'll notice is that as soon as you wake up and you become mindfully self-aware, meaning you're observing the body sitting, you'll notice you are aware of thoughts objectively. Without trying to notice thoughts, you just become aware of them. So you could try this right now. You could just use your mental voice, your inner voice to just kind of quietly note, just sitting. And as soon as that voice goes silent, you notice that you have this objective awareness of the body sitting. And with that awareness, you might have noticed, oh, I was aware of a thought arising, or I could hear the inner voice begin to chime in and say something like, what's going to happen next, or whatever it says. So this is where I recommend beginning the practice, is building this foundation of learning to be aware of the body, not some strong effort, just knowing what the body's doing. I'm sitting and I know that the body's sitting. That's it. And I recommend using the breath as a sort of timer. So the idea is we're not trying to focus on the breath. It's not an object of meditation. It's just something that can be noticed. It's part of this experience that's happening, just like thoughts. So the idea is you know that you're sitting, but you don't have to try to maintain some effort for some long period of time. Just once you know that you're sitting, just be curious about the experience for just one inhalation, and then again for one exhalation. Now, if you've been practicing sitting in this way for some time, you'll notice that there might be some stability of awareness where you could be aware of the body sitting and thoughts might arise and pass away without distracting you. And you might notice that this sustains itself for maybe 30 seconds or a minute without being distracted. And I would say anytime around there, anytime where if you notice that you can just sit for 30 seconds without being distracted by your thinking, I think at that point you have enough stability of awareness where you can now, from time to time, intentionally direct awareness to where you think thoughts are coming from, or where they seem to be coming from. And this can add a very sharp level of insight into the truth that you're not your thoughts. Because if you direct awareness to where you think these thoughts are coming from, what tends to happen is you see a thought cease. If you hold a thought up, in fact, you could intentionally think one. You could intentionally bring a thought into your mind and you try to hold it in awareness and just look at it. It dissolves pretty quickly because there is no fundamental reality to that thought. It's imagination. And when you do this with some stability of awareness, every time you see a thought dissolve and the moment it ceases, there is insight into the truth that you, my friend, are not your thoughts. And every time you have this insight, that wisdom deepens. And as that wisdom deepens, you start to drop the habit of identifying with thoughts. And you'll notice you start to stop identifying with the ego. And it's in some cases the ego can just drop away for a moment or so, even if just for a few seconds. And that's where you get to experience what is normally referred to as an enlightenment experience, which doesn't have to be anything special, where you realize the brain gets this direct experience of what it is like to be, what it is like to experience being alive in a human without this ego present. And of course, there's peace there because if there's no ego, there's no problems. So the practice for doing this is again, once you feel like you have some stability of awareness, the easiest way that I know of is just to use a simple question. So as you're sitting, you could just ask, is there any thinking now? And as the voice goes silent, just notice where your awareness goes. So your awareness goes to where that thought just ceased, and very likely where the next thought is going to be arising from. And so little by little, you don't have to repeat this question like a mantra, but from time to time, you might just ask, is there any thinking now? And right there, you're looking right at the source of thinking, listening to the source of thinking. And this is where I think is the most important little step is it's not just an observation. So it might feel as though awareness is kind of turning inward at first, and then as thoughts drop, it's hard, awareness kind of becomes non-local. It's hard to tell if it's awareness looking in or awareness looking out, that those words kind of lose their sense of meaning. But at the same time, it's not just an observational thing with what we normally think of as the visual sense. It's also you want to be listening. So as you ask the question, is there any thinking now? It's both looking and listening at the same time. And with a little bit of practice, you'll notice that you don't have to try to look, you don't have to try to listen. As soon as you ask the question, is there any thinking now? And the voice goes silent, you already have the awareness that you're trying to develop. This is one of my favorite quotes is from a teacher from Japan named Shunryu Suzuki, where some people were arguing about, the awakened state and how do you know if you have it and when do you know? And he said, the moment you take the posture, you already have it. I think many people don't really know what he's pointing to here because it's so simple, but yet so powerful. The moment that you ask that question, you just say, "Is there any thinking now?" At that moment, you are perfectly aware of your own mind. You're aware of thoughts, free from the ego. You're not identified with them. And you'll notice that awareness is aware of right at the source where thoughts come from without any effort, really. And so the practice then is learning to relax into that. Instead of trying to maintain some effort, it's just once you're aware of where thoughts are coming from, is to literally do nothing at all. In fact, you might even remind yourself. You might use the inner voice to, once you've asked the question, is there any thinking now? Boom, you're awake. Now just remind yourself, just sitting, doing absolutely nothing. And you're as awake and aware as you're ever going to be, right? When that thought ceases. So this is really where the practice starts to build some amazing fruit. It's really being lazy, my friends. It's it's once you're awake, once you're observing where thoughts are coming from, there's no further effort needed. No mental activity required. You're just simply being, doing nothing, just being. And this is actually as simple as it is. Most people don't believe it could possibly be this simple until you start practicing this and you realize how peaceful existence can be. When you wake up, you're observing where thoughts are coming from, and then you're just resting in this natural state of awareness. There are no problems. There's nothing but peace. Out of habit, we inherently want to do something more. We want to try to do something. We want to try to keep this peace that we have. We want to try to make it deeper and make it more joyful or something. So this is just the ego trying to get stuff, trying to keep itself alive. If you can learn to just once you wake up, you've asked the question, is there any thinking now? And you're just looking and listening. Just do absolutely nothing. Just be. There's nothing more to do. You're already free. I hope this video was helpful for you. If you have a question about the practice of mindfulness or mindful self-awareness, please be sure to subscribe to this channel and leave your question as a comment in one of the videos on the channel. I'll do my best to answer that question or one like it. If you'd like a great resource for practicing mindfulness and mindful self-awareness, you might like my book, The Magic of Mindful Self-Awareness: How to Stop Overthinking, Clear Your Mind, and Be Happy Almost All the Time. There's a link in the description. Until next time, may you be happy and kind, my friend.